bringing up facts. If I point a finger, that's point of attack. Good point, who's next? Flag on the plate, now I'm causing them death. We bet on ourselves, so what you expect? A die-hard fan, never live with regret. Yes, sir. Go to my neck. Burgundy flex. Who wants the smoke? We bringing it home. Be my guest. Look how we step. Who we got next? Step on the right, step on the left. Who do we rep? Commanders. Where's my soldiers? Right side. Commanders. Where's my soldiers? Left side. Commanders. Where's my soldiers? Watch the middle. Commanders. Where's my soldiers? High off the way that this sound, they turn up as soon as they feet hit the ground. I am not playing around. I hit them, I bet that they feeling me now.
Welcome, one and all across the nation and around the world. I welcome you all to episode 20 of the Commanders Gridiron Report. I am your host, Drew Willingham, and we are back from a 6-week hiatus because there wasn't too much news for this show to keep it going each and every week. The beard is back. I know some of you are going to be loving that, but hey, we got some football news to discuss on this program. Again, it is episode 20 of the Commanders Gridiron Report. Episode 19 was back on January 8th, and on that episode, we had to talk about Ron Rivera and the woes of the previous season. And on that episode, we covered his dismissal, and we've got plenty more to discover and unravel on this edition of the Commanders Gridiron Report. And for those of you in the chat, before we get started with that, let me go ahead and acknowledge you guys. Mickey Delaney's in the house. What's up, my brother? Thank you for being here for episode 20. Sick Diggy's in the house, my man, as well. And here comes the Crimson and Gold beatdown. Yes, while rocking some Crimson and Gold, an old, well, I would say he's a legend in this franchise's tenure, but we'll talk about him as he is actually still with the team for this year, that being Ryan Kerrigan. We'll talk about him in here in a little bit. But let's get it on, says Sick Diggy, as we most certainly will. I stand corrected. I meant Burgundy and Gold, and I should have corrected myself as I read it because I was the one reading it. That just goes to show how excited I am. I'll read anything on the teleprompter today as far as your comments goes. Hi, Sick Diggy, says Mickey Delaney, and even Ike is in the house saying, yo. We've got Mickey saying, hi, Ike, and Sick saying, what's good there, Mick? Well, I'm glad that you guys are having a good time out here in the chat so far on episode 20. Let's go ahead and get this started with the 1st and 10 and see what I got here in store for you.
They are the Washington Commanders. New name, new marks, new uniform.
Soldiers, are we ready for Operation Burgundy?
And that's right here with this 1st and 10. With this one, we've got welcome back to the fans of this team, this show, and the brands associated within. Guys, for real, like it's been a little bit since we've been here on the airwaves. And with this, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of you that have been watching this religiously each and every time we are here for these past 19 episodes leading up to episode 20. Whether you're watching on Sartoba Media, whether you're watching on A7BN Sports or Team MBS Media, thank you all out there between the platforms of YouTube, Twitter, well, now X, Twitch, LinkedIn, and even Facebook. Facebook got you there for A7BN Sports for today only on my Facebook page as well. And I'll explain more of the reasons along that here later in the show. But with the 1st and 10, just wanted to give a quick shout out to those of you who have been watching this. This season was a tough one to cover. Not many people who start a show like this on the interwebs who have a team that goes 4-13 will see it through. And, when it comes to me, when I say I'm going to do something, I stick with it, from beginning to end of the season. And, with the exciting moves, I would say that this team has made over the course of the past 5 to 6 weeks, I've decided to bring this show back for a second season to cover the entirety of the upcoming 2024 NFL season. And the way I look at it is you can't get much worse than 4-13. Well, you can, but I don't think this team will. I don't think that they'll take a step back like that. At worst, they may do the same, 4-13 record for this upcoming season. However, I just have a feeling with the moves that are to come, with free agency coming up here very soon, which we'll cover here in this episode towards the end of it. And, you got the draft, potential trades as well. I think they're going to make some moves. I think this ownership is hungry to turn this team around. Are they going to go deep in the playoffs next year? No. Are they going to even make the playoffs? That's a big question mark. But with this division, the NFC East, anything's possible. So I'm not going to throw myself out there like I did last year and said I think that they can go 8-9 or 9-8. And I was off. I was halfway off when it came to my predictions as far as the wins and losses. So I own that. I own that towards the middle and the end of the season if you were watching throughout the previous episodes. So, when it comes to a fan of this team, formerly known as the Redskins, and yes, this is a retro jersey, but it doesn't have the logo in plain sight to where the snowflakes can get upset about it. But this is a Ryan Kerrigan jersey, and I'm going to mention the reason why I'm wearing the Ryan Kerrigan jersey today here when I cover the next segment when it comes to the Burgundy Flex review of the moves that were made. But want to give a shout out to all of you who are currently watching between Facebook and YouTube and the comments that we have so far. Looks like Mickey says, not too much, Ike. They are talking back and forth here in the chat, but I love it, guys. Thank you all. When it comes to you out there, this is the reason why I do it. It could be one of you watching. It could be 17. It could be 100 watching at the same time. Doesn't matter. As long as you're entertained by what I'm bringing out here, as much of the fire as I can possibly bring when it comes to talking smack on this team, because even though I am a lifelong fan of the team, when it comes to the analysis of it, I break it down how it sees. And last year, they sucked. They absolutely sucked, which is why they were 4-13. I mean, when you put it all in perspective, that's why they're 4-13. They sucked, and it doesn't mean that the talent sucked. It could be anywhere from mental preparation of the game, film study, working together with your staff to be as prepared as possible. You can suck that way too, and the way the dynamic and the culture was within that locker room for so long, even before Riverboat Ron took over the head coaching duties back in 2019, it was absolutely terrible. Well, he got hired after that season. It was the 2020 season when he started, because that was when the whole name change and all the debacle and everything started there in the media. So when I think about everything as a whole, he was kind of set up for failure. And even though he kind of rode the coattails of Cam Newton before coming to Washington, it still didn't help his case when he had other supporting talent throughout, like, Jack Del Rio, even though he didn't do a great job as defensive coordinator while in Washington towards the end, he did have some flashes in the pan there, and he did have success in other franchises before as a head coach and as a defensive coordinator. So I can't completely throw the book at Jack Del Rio. I think part of his demise was what was going on around him. And if the culture sucks, if overall chemistry, if the team is being brought down by negativity, it can even affect the best performers on the team from doing their job and doing it the way that they are expected to do it. So, and a lot of that, I think, trickled down from the ownership. Well, now the ownership's gone. Old Dan Snyder is gone. And we've got a real player in there as far as ownership when you think of, they're basketball guys. But the 76ers have had I wouldn't say resurgence, but they've at least gotten to a point to where they're a little bit more respectable now in the 2020s than they were 10 years ago under the Josh Harris ownership. Then you got Magic Johnson with everything he's accomplished, and not just basketball, but baseball, and I think racing, other sports as well, too. He's won a championship in every single sport he's been an owner in, and now he's with the Washington Commanders. I'm not saying they're going to win this year, okay? But what I am going to say is they are going to win at some point within the next 10 years, and you can call me crazy all you want to, but by 2034, I see them either playing in a Super Bowl or winning a Super Bowl within the next 10 years, okay? Not saying they're going to win it all and be a dynasty and smack everybody around, but even wild card teams can get to the Super Bowl. We've seen, tremendous things from lower level rated teams in the past, Eagles, so on, okay? look back on it. Look back at history, okay? Not saying this team is going to do it right there, but with that type of mentality and leadership in the front office, even if a head coaching candidate got upset this offseason, and maybe upset's not the right word, but he got a little perturbed because they're basketball guys. Well, yeah, they have a background in basketball, and maybe they're trying to bring some of their management tactics to this type of front office. Some aspects of it might work, some might not. We will find out here in the upcoming future. It's going to take about 3 to 5 years, I believe, to build a consistent, respectable team year in and year out. Hopefully, they can do it with a different name, because I hate the Commanders. I hate the nickname that I gave them, the Commies. I've been calling them since they ever changed the name 2 years ago. I would have much rather had the Washington football team, or renamed it the Washington Team of Football, so we could say hashtag WTF every time they took the loss. That is me, and that is the fire that I've been waiting for 6 weeks to bring back to you, because I didn't have any news to come to you with each and every week. But the last time we were here again, we were talking about Ron Rivera's departure. And now we have much more to mother, father, and cover here in the Burgundy Flex Review. Let's go ahead and take it to the Burgundy Flex Review and see what kind of moves this team has made in the past 6 weeks.
Go to my neck, Burgundy Flex. Pour out the smoke, we bringing it home. Be like that.
And here with the Burgundy Flex Review, look at these dudes that got here on this graphic. You got old Adam Peters. You got a former Cowboys coach in Dan Quinn, which we've got a lot to talk about with him here in a moment, along with Cliff Kingsbury, who formerly coached Kyler Murray there for the Arizona Cardinals, and we'll also talk a little bit more about his background as well. But, let's look at these moves that the Commanders made during this offseason. And it goes back to, once they let go of Ron Rivera, they were kind of quiet throughout February, because they took through January, took the remaining 3 weeks or so to figure out who their head coach was going to be. And throughout that time, we had the NFL playoffs, which, the divisional round, the championship round, the Pro Bowl. And then, of course, we had the Super Bowl, which it was just before the Super Bowl that they announced that he was the head coach. So it took pretty much the entirety of the NFL playoffs. And even though there were several candidates out there that they still could have waited on to interview a little bit and give them a little bit more time for the position, they felt the time was right on February 3rd to announce that Dan Quinn, the man right there in the center of this graphic, is your next head coach for the Washington Commanders for this 2024 season. And yes, I was not really that excited about this pick right here when it came to head coaching right there. And the one part that I did stumble over was the move they made before they brought in Dan Quinn. It was just before that around the time that they fired Ron Rivera, they brought in Adam Peters. And for those of you who don't know Adam Peters, he is the man on the top left right there of this graphic, and one that spent his time in some pretty reputable places before he came to Washington. And when you look up Adam Peters, he's only in his early 40s. He hasn't been in the game but for so long, about 20 years. But where he started was the New England Patriots back in 2003. And when he was there, he was just a scout, but he helped towards the talent that came in there for those second and third Super Bowls, as well as that perfect season that they had in 2007. He was there for all that. So Adam Peters got 2 Super Bowls with the Patriots as a scout, then was a part of that perfect season. You bring that type of clout around the NFL. He then went to the Denver Broncos and was part of their staff as an assistant director of college scouting from 2014 to 2015. And before that, the previous 2 years, he was a scout with them as well. So 4 years with the Broncos, got a 3rd Super Bowl ring. So this guy, within a 11, 12 season span, got 3 Super Bowls between 2 pretty good teams, and having arguably 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Whichever order you want to put them in, more than likely Tom Brady ahead of Peyton Manning, you're going to have them up there as in your top 3 to 5 quarterbacks of all time. More than likely in your top 3 for both of them. But hey, that's just me. When it comes to this right here, Adam Peters is a part of 3 Super Bowl winning teams. So when I think about that, does that mean the Commanders are going to the Super Bowl this year or next year or even the year after that? No, but that at least improves their chances to at least make the playoffs for one and be a team that can make some noise, at least within the next few years. I believe that is possible. Getting to the wild card round, maybe advancing to the division round, probably not getting past that within the first 3 years of this team's existence under this leadership. But I can see an improvement coming their way based on what Adam Peters did there. Not to mention, in this past season, he was the assistant general manager for that season and the previous two. So spent 3 seasons as the assistant general manager for the San Francisco 49ers. And then the previous 4 seasons before that, he was the vice president of personnel for the same team, of player personnel, may add. So it's a good amount of time. And he almost had a 4th Super Bowl had the 49ers showed up, at least the way that we thought they would throughout this past season. But I predicted the Chiefs were going to win, and I'm glad I was right about that because they had the championship stature within that team because of what they had done in the previous 4 years, winning 2 of those previous 4 Super Bowls. So, hey, that's another conversation for another day, but Adam Peters still built something special over there between those teams that he was with, or at least was a part of a staff that built something special over there. Michael Miller says, I tell you one thing, we trade back and I'm done being a fan of this dog crap franchise. Hey, I think I got to agree with you right there because even though some people would say, hell to the no, to the no, 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 hell no, to the no. But when it comes to this number 2 overall pick, this is a great statement right here, and I'm going to give you this.
Acknowledge me.
I'm going to acknowledge that was a great take because they need this number 2 pick. Who they take with it, I don't know. And I don't think they need to dump Sam Howell right away because they don't need to throw whoever they draft, this rookie quarterback, into the fire. You still have Sam Howell on a very cheap deal for another 2 years. So you can develop this young quarterback similar to the ways of what Patrick Mahomes has developed like. And even though he played behind Alex Smith and had somebody to really, truly learn from, you can't really learn from Sam Howell, but so much because he's only been there for 2 years and a starter for the past year. You got Cliff Kingsbury, who's supposedly the quarterback guru for what he did with Patrick Mahomes, even though I feel like in a similar fashion that Ron Rivera rode Cam Newton's coattails from Carolina, I think Cliff Kingsbury's riding Patrick Mahomes' coattails from Texas Tech. And to be honest, Patrick Mahomes didn't become Patrick Mahomes until he got with Andy Reid in the Kansas City Chiefs. And Alex Smith was someone who was great to learn from. If Alex Smith was still on this roster and this was the case, Sam was playing, but Alex was still there to help develop the young quarterback that gets drafted as the 2nd overall pick, I would say that would be a great scenario. But you've got some other great leadership within this locker room that you supposedly brought in that we'll definitely cover here shortly because there's other moves they made besides those 2 right there. But when it comes to this, I think I have to agree with Mike saying here because I don't want them trading back that pick either. So he also says it's the Commos. The Commos is more fitting, especially if they trade back from 2. Okay, I think I'd have to agree with that, but I still like the Commies. It's what I've kind of stuck with since the day they changed the name. And I'm going to stick with it until they change it to a more proper name. Who the hell is Adam Peters? Well, Ike, when it comes to this, I guess since you don't know, you need to do this.
You should know your role and shut your mouth.
Absolutely, because you need to pay attention. Adam Peters is the new general manager for the Washington Commanders. And 6 says, wait a minute, the Dodgers didn't win a World Series when Magic was the owner, did they? I believe, did he sell the team? I thought he still owned part of the team. Or did he sell it, I guess, to become part of the owner for the Commanders? I don't know. Let me know here in the comments, guys, if you think that he is the owner or if you know, look it up for me because I think he is still part owner for the Dodgers and was there when they won the championship. If he sold it, then I think he sold it after they won because I'm pretty sure that he was there celebrating when I watched the game and when they won that in the 4th game of the series to clinch it. I'm pretty sure they panned to Magic Johnson at some point. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he was with the team when they won that World Series. I left you a message on your chat about Eric. Oh, yeah, you did, about the Eric Bieniemy post. I did not get a chance to check out your post as you were talking about there, Mick. Go ahead and let us know here in the comments what that was about, and we can acknowledge that here on the show. But when it comes to this topic right here with the Burgundy Flex review, Adam Peters was the one move in the front office as far as the bringing in and the releasing of talent that was the biggest move made during this offseason, because they had to make a move at GM after everything that, had transpired, not just with this past tenure of this management style of the team, but before that, with what they had going on before those moves. This basically is clearing out the slate from the past couple front office teams that they've had in there, because it has been such a downward spiral for this team for quite some time. And it's definitely nice to see a change here. And I think Adam Peters, with where he came from, even though he wasn't the head honcho making the decisions where he was at before, I think he was around enough great leadership that it's going to rub off to where he'll be able to be his own person and leave his mark on this franchise somehow. We can look back on this day, February 26, 2024, at some point down the road and see if I was right or wrong. We can visit this back in 3 to 5 years and see what's changed in that time frame. But right now, I think this was a great move for the Commanders. However, I don't think they made consistently great moves throughout this offseason, and one that I've been pretty vocal about, and that being in this graphic right here, but as well as the Burgundy Flex review graphic, that middleman right there, Dan Quinn, is somebody that I feel like was not the greatest choice at head coach. When you look at this team right here and what they have done, they have gone backwards in the past couple of years, which was kind of expected based on everything that had happened. But with Dan Quinn, he was a head coach before in Atlanta, okay? And in Atlanta, he was there for, several years. And he was there for 6 seasons as their head coach and led them to Super Bowl 51, where they had definitely the biggest collapse in Super Bowl history, as they were up 28-3 at halftime and definitely gave up the entirety of that lead to the New England Patriots for their 5th Super Bowl in the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick era. And when you look at everything that has happened since that tenure, Matt Ryan was probably at his peak at that point when he got to that point in the Super Bowl and everything fell. They were never the same after that loss, never got back to the Super Bowl, and never had anywhere close to the success that they had leading up to that time frame. Dan Quinn, after the 2020 season, was relieved of his duties and spent the previous 3 seasons as a defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. For the majority of that time, he was great at what he did. And, leading up to his time frame with the Atlanta Falcons, he was with the Seattle Seahawks and was their defensive coordinator when they won as the Legion of Boom's defense dominated that game and won when they played against the Denver Broncos. So he had that clout coming from there. Goes to Atlanta, had success up until that Super Bowl 51 appearance. Then he does what he does and has the downfall. And I think the biggest thing that we're kind of looking at here is, he kind of did this early on in his time frame as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, because he went there in year 2. He was only in his 2nd year of Atlanta's tenureship as the head coach when he took over there in Atlanta and got them to the Super Bowl. He spent the previous 4 seasons having rough time there with that team throughout that season and the next season and the next season and the next season. And then he goes to Dallas, and right back to Dallas. Here we go with, he did pretty good to start out his tenure for the first 2.5 seasons. But he left Dallas on a very terrible note with the way the Cowboys were eliminated in this past season's playoffs. When I think about Super Bowl 51, when I think about what transpired the next 4 years, when I think about the way Dallas's tenure ended with him as a defensive coordinator, those 3 things that I think about, I just don't have high hopes for Dan Quinn over there in DC as the head coach, because it seems like everything's great, but at some point a switch gets flipped and there's no way to flip it back. And I just am wondering now, when you're this front office that you are now, how much time do you give Dan Quinn to figure this out over there in Washington? He's probably going to have some bumps in the road this season. And then I think, in the second year, they'll have a little bit of success. But what I hope doesn't happen in his case, if he is meant to be the head coach here, is they have success and, exceed expectations for this upcoming season. And then the second season, they exceed him again. And then he does what he did in Atlanta, where he just takes a major nosedives and never can flip that switch back. That is what I'm in fear of, and that we wasted this time with another coach that, out of all the candidates besides Bill Belichick, may have had the most success as far as coaching a team to a Super Bowl appearance and almost winning, but almost doesn't get you a championship when you're putting down for a resume and going for another team. I feel like there was some other candidates out there that would have done a better job. And when I think about Mike Vrabel and the type of success he had over there in Tennessee, and then I think about Bill Belichick, even though when you watch the Dynasty series, which is a great series over on Apple TV Plus, you can see that maybe it's time for him to put his whistle up. Maybe it's time, because that style of coaching may not work in today's era going forward in football. I think Mike Vrabel could have worked out in D.C. I think Ben Johnson could have worked out in D.C., but at the same time, it was because the ownership is more like basketball guys. They didn't come to terms on an agreement, and whether it's your second or third or your fourth choice, you went with Dan Quinn. So Dan Quinn, I hope, sees the opportunity and proves us wrong out here, because I'm not trying to throw with so much shade. I was really upset about it first. Kind of went off on Total Football Talk with Cole Johnson on that episode that Tuesday, the one where this aired, of his hiring as the head coach. I kind of went off a little bit there, but after having some time to think about it, I'm willing to give the man his chance. But there's some other things that come along with this move that we have to talk about later in this show that I'll wait till then to acknowledge. Got a couple comments here. Looks like Six says Magic is still co-partner owner of the Dodgers under the Guggenheim Baseball Management Group. Okay. So, yeah, he did get that World Series. That's what I thought. And it's too long of a post to hear, but Eric, he going to be with UCLA. So is he going to UCLA as the head coach? Let me know here in the comments there, Mick. So there we've covered Adam Peters as part of these offseason moves. We've covered Dan Quinn being part of these offseason moves. As far as the leadership within the transactions being made for the player personnel and the staff being, Adam Peters. Get your head coach and Dan Quinn. On that same day that they made him the head coach on February 15th, they announced that Sarah Hogan was going to be the coaching chief of staff. Pete Oegan is the player development coach. You got David Blow being the assistant quarterback coach. Andre Coleman is the offensive assistant coach. Bobby Ingram is the wide receivers coach. Bobby Johnson is the offensive line coach. Brian Johnson is the assistant head coach / offensive pass game coordinator. You've got Anthony Lynn as the run game coordinator / running back coach. Tavita Pritchard is the quarterback coach. David Rye is the tight end coach. Darnell Stapleton is the offensive line coach. Shane Taub as the offensive quality control coach. And the biggest move out of all of the staff that are coming with Dan Quinn would be former NFL head coach, who is now going to be the offensive coordinator, and that's Cliff Kingsbury with a K. Yes, Cliff with a K, the former draft pick of the New England Patriots, a third-round pick, a third-string quarterback behind Tom Brady at that time. And you got to look at the fact that we've got Adam Peters here, someone who's making these moves, bringing in Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury. To some, I think they were kind of bold moves because, of course, Dan Quinn has the lack of success that he did with the Falcons. And then, he kind of nosedived with the Cowboys defensive coordinator towards the end of his tenure there. But then I look here at Cliff Kingsbury, who maybe didn't have the right support system in Arizona with Kyler Murray. Not saying Kyler Murray was the problem, but the pieces around him. You had an aging Larry Fitzgerald who was getting out of the game at the time. You were just taking over from the Bruce Arians tenure, which didn't end in the greatest of fashions, considering that he then went to Tampa Bay and did what he did over there. So, the ownership there, the Bidwells have definitely not been the greatest when it comes to building a team. So that could have been part of his demise over there in Arizona. But when thinking about Cliff's, time as a coach, okay, from the time that he was with the Cardinals, he went to USC as the senior offensive analyst. And, he did okay in his time over there, helping develop Caleb Williams to what we may see as a decent prospect here in the NFL. But, I feel like the 4 years that he was with Arizona, it didn't really do him much justice. Going from Texas Tech, riding the wave of Patrick Mahomes, he probably should have gone to a better opportunity as an offensive coordinator and then built that cloud up to go into a better chance of a team and success than the Arizona Cardinals. Because the Arizona Cardinals there, I'm just with what they had. Kyler Murray is something that's a great talent, but they still lack the weapons around him to make him successful. And when I think about Cliff with a K and what he could potentially do with this offense, when you got Terry McLaurin, if you do not give up on Sam Howell, I feel like he could be the answer to developing Sam Howell. Eric Bieniemy was kind of sheltered over there with the Chiefs. And when you think about the success he had, he wouldn't have had it without Andy Reid, that being Eric Bieniemy. And Cliff Kingsbury has the opportunity now with a decent team around him as far as the offensive weapons that they could build. They need an offensive line for one. But if they figure that out this offseason, they'll be okay and get a secondary piece in the wide receiving core to kind of help balance the load for Terry McLaurin. I feel like they need to make an upgrade at tight end too, because, Logan Thomas has definitely not been the most healthy of a weapon that they have had in the previous years. So when you think about all those weapons right there that you could potentially have, when you think about all of it right there, I feel like Cliff Kingsbury could potentially do something special with Adam Peters running the front office to bring him the weapons that he needs on offense. Dan Quinn can still, even though he's not the defensive coordinator, he can still oversee the defense a little bit as well, like he did previously in his other tenures. But I think that with what he said since being hired, as he's learned to delegate the responsibilities a little bit better to the other people in their roles, which he didn't do the greatest job at in Atlanta. So maybe him admitting that and showing some growth could be some promise for this team's future when it comes to this team that's been assembled during this offseason. And for that being the Burgundy Flex review, is those were the three biggest moves that this team made during this past offseason. With that being said, guys, we're going to take this into a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we got the showstopper topic to talk about. I'll see you here on the other side of the commercial break.
Commanders, where my soldiers, right side. Commanders, where my soldiers, left side.
Football, and more football, you say? Well, tune in to Total Football Talk. Join your hosts, Drew Willingham.
You were playing like a dumpster Pelican quarterback.
And Cole Johnson.
It sets up for possible play action. Did you hear that, Dak Prescott?
As they take you through all the paces, both on the field and in the boardroom, of Total Football Talk. Every Tuesday at
9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central.
Exclusively on the Surtoba Media and the Comey Media Incorporated YouTube channel.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, look. Hey, stop playing games. Y'all already know. Go ahead and toss him some Willie Bucks. Ain't nobody playing around. $, D Willy 87. Go ahead, hit him up on the Cash App, and go ahead and give him some Willie the bucks. Look at Drew looking stoic, ladies and gentlemen, stoic on that $10 bill. So go ahead, slide my man over some Willie bucks, and we good. That's all I'm saying. We good. How about some Willie bucks?
Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
If you're looking for a sports program that gives you the flavor.
Washington Commanders? Really?
This whole thing stinks to high heaven.
That pulls no punches.
Thuggish act by a thuggish actor.
That gives you some humor.
Praise everything LeBron does and never criticize it.
If you want a show that gives you good times, then this is that show. BS3 Network proudly presents.
I am Cole Johnson, and welcome to
Cole Sports with a Z. Every Friday on Patreon, and every Saturday on YouTube, Spreaker, and all other outlets.
Commanders, where my soldiers? Right side. Commanders, where my soldiers? Left side.
And welcome back to the Commanders Gridiron Report, episode 20. We are live as we've gone through our first big segments of the show, that being the 1st and 10 and the Burgundy Flex review. Before we take it to the showstopper, let's see what other comments we've got here in the chat. Looks like Mick was telling me about a post with EB, and no, he thinks it's as defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator, more likely offensive coordinator because EB works with the offense. But you can read it on my wall. Well, thanks, Mick. I appreciate it. Ike says, I like Dan Quinn in DC. Means my Giants will get 2 dubs this season. Ike!
Hell to the no, to the no, 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 no. Hell no, no, to the no, no.
Early into this show, and we're already off the rails. You should do this, Ike.
You should know your role and shut your mouth.
When it comes to you already talking about the Giants getting 2 dubs just because Dan Quinn goes from, being defensive coordinator in Dallas to going to DC as the head coach. Come on now.
Stop it. Get some help.
All right. Got to calm down out here on these streams. When it comes to that, he even says he likes what I said with Cliff with the K with the laughing emojis, and then says he sucked in Arizona and everywhere else. I had to give you that on that one. I had to give you the Wonder Bread Choir on that one. That was definitely great. And then he said he just sent me a message. My man, Wise El Jefe is in the house, says, what's up, Drew? What's up, my man? Trying to get this all wrapped up here shortly so I can check out Mentality here in a little bit. I also got Stuck in My Mind podcast. Throw those on and listen to those while I got some other things brewing up around the house or whatnot. And Mick says, Ike, stay in your lane. We've already got those stay in your lane comments out here on the streams, as well as Ryan McCoffey is in the house saying, Drew!
Yeah!
We get excited out here. We even got to throw a little Bruce Willis up in this act.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
All right. Slightly off the rails time is now over. Got to get back on task and take this on into the next segment, with that being the showstopper.
High off the way that this sound, they turn up as soon as they feed the ground. I am not playing around. I hit them, I bet that they feeling me now.
And here with the showstopper, just like all of these people in this graphic that I have here, there's a lot we got to talk about when it comes to, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but we got some things we got to talk about with the showstopper topic. Look at old Eric Bieniemy waving goodbye. Yes, I found that picture of him waving goodbye right there when you got old Robinson and Dobson right there in the back behind him. You got old Dan Quinn hired as the new head coach right beside him. You got Sam Howell pointing up to the showstopper graphic. You got the owners and the GM on the far right side. You got Harris, Johnson, and Peters on the side over there to the right. Here with that being said in this graphic, should Eric Bieniemy been given another chance at offensive coordinator for the 2024 season? When it comes to this right here, EB may have gotten screwed a little bit when it came to this team in the direction that they were in by the time he was hired last offseason. There's a lot of hype on him coming from the Chiefs, a two-time Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator. And, to some aspects, he got exposed in this past season. And, according to Mick, he's the new offensive coordinator in UCLA. So we'll have to monitor that, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit more in the next episode. But for this one, should he have been given another chance at offensive coordinator? Looking back and thinking on it, even though I was initially pretty PO'd about it, I think with the amount of moves that were made this offseason as GM, head coach, you don't want to start your tenure off with somebody that you're not comfortable setting a work relationship with in that type of manner for that type of franchise, especially coming back from what this team has to come back from, considering the turmoil from the previous ownership, the coaching between the Gruden era and now this. I look back on the Shanahan era as, that was definitely a mismanagement of Snyder, because had they worked better together, I think the Shanahans could have done something special for a few more years and potentially at least had somewhat of a playoff run. But shoulda, coulda, woulda doesn't matter when we're where we're at now. Looking at this, should he have been given another chance at offensive coordinator? I think they made the right decision. The sad part about it, and what's unfortunate for EB, is they made it too late in the season, or too late in the offseason, for him to have an opportunity, another coaching job or a relative coaching job in respect to what he has been doing with another organization, or even going back to the Chiefs. I thought he would have gone back to the Chiefs as some type of assistant to the assistant or something to get him back in the door, especially since they're going for a three-peat. But maybe at this point, because he's been removed for a year, they don't want to mesh and mix with what they've currently got going on in that locker room staff as far as the coaching and the personnel around the players. So that could be potentially why they didn't make that move. But it's unfortunate for EB because, his resume speaks volumes leading up to this past year. And it's sad that 1 year and the demise of that 1 year can affect you to where now you're going back to college. And it's been, I think, 10 years since he was a coach at Colorado, where Coach Prime is now. I think it's been since then, since he was last in the college, coaching aspect. So that'll be interesting. That'll be something interesting to look back on. But there was one thing that I kind of skipped over, unfortunately, in the previous segment. And one thing I wanted to talk about, especially since I'm wearing this jersey today, the Ryan Kerrigan jersey. He remained with the team. The one cool thing that they did retain as far as the staff from the previous staff was Kerrigan, who'd only been there as an assistant defensive line coach for the past 2 seasons. And now for the 3rd consecutive year will be with his former team that he played for in the coaching staff, is someone that can help out these linebackers there, and especially this defense that was doing pretty well at the start of the season this past year, but after the first 5 to 6 weeks, they took a major nosedive. So looking at this team right here, we could potentially see something special now that they've made these moves they made this offseason. At first, I wasn't excited about it, but with Eric Bieniemy, even though UCLA is not the best opportunity from what he would have had if he were to been let go 3 to 4 weeks earlier, like he should have been, because all the other opportunities, the Seahawks and other opportunities where he could have gone and been an offensive coordinator, were already filled. So, and even the opportunity to potentially go back to the Chiefs might have been too late, because he could have had those talks before they went to the Super Bowl, and regardless of the outcome, could have gone back. But hey, that is how the NFL works. It's how football works. And unfortunately, that's what we had to deal with in this past offseason. So with the showstopper, I think that the Commanders made the right decision, unfortunately, because at first I was upset about it. I really liked the hiring the past offseason, but just there's too many button to the heads between the players and him, unfortunately, that we saw what happened, and it was inevitable for it to happen at that point, especially when you go 4-13. The only thing that would be worse is if this team this upcoming year does a 4-13 record or worse. I hope not. I really, really hope not, because with all the hype, especially Cliff with a K, apparently learning his lessons and coming back as the offensive coordinator of this team, learning his previous NFL lessons, and then Dan Quinn apparently learning how to delegate since he's been with Dallas. We're going to see if these words ring true. But I really, really, really like I said earlier in the show, the Adam Peters hiring. And if we got to have a really good GM and lose someone who'd lost 2 Super Bowls and Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator in return, especially when Adam Peters has 3 in his time in the NFL. Again, 2 with the Patriots as a scout and 1 with the Broncos as a player scout as well. And then almost had a 4th one this past year. Had the 49ers not laid an egg in that last quarter and in overtime as well. When you think about it, I feel like Adam Peters was the home run pick in this offseason. And unfortunate when it comes to this topic that I had right here, the result of that was we lost one of the bigger hyped additions of this team when it came to the offensive coordinator from the last year and the hype that we had seen on Eric Bieniemy in the previous years because of his success with the Chiefs. So it's unfortunate, but we'll have to see how things pan out with this team. And Mickey says that he did get screwed a little bit. He also got effed. He did get effed out here. And because of that, we got to say this.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Yes, absolutely. We got to do that because, yeah, he did. And, yeah, put this out there too.
Now, that is absurd.
It absolutely is absurd when you put it in that aspect, but
Let me talk to you.
it was the right move. Unfortunately, it just was, because he was part of the previous coaching staff, and the previous coaching staff went 4-13. And the more that I think about it, the more that I've accepted that it's just best for all parties to move on at that point. You know, sometimes you don't want to accept certain things, but you got to and move on for the best. And when it comes to the showstopper, unfortunately, that was the task at hand for old EB. Guys, we got one more commercial break before our final segment of this return episode for this February one-off special edition of the Commanders Gridiron Report, the first one in 6 weeks and the only one for the month of February. I'll see you guys back here in about 2 minutes from this final commercial break.
Commanders, where's my soldiers? Right side. Commanders, where's my soldiers? Left side.
Everything Boston. I love you morons. You kids from the block, New Edition.
Dear whatever the law firm is. Sincerely, the U.S. Supreme Court.
Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. Go yourself again, Jason Whitlock.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, look. Hey, stop playing games. Y'all already know. Go ahead and toss him some Willie bucks. Ain't nobody playing around. $, D Willy 87. Go ahead, hit him up on the Cash App, and go ahead and give him some Willie bucks. Look at Drew looking stoic, ladies and gentlemen. Stoic on that $10 bill. So go ahead, slide my man over some Willie bucks, and we good. That's all I'm saying. We good. Some Willie bucks.
Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
Oh, yes. The tradition, the pageantry, the spectacle, the history, the slut. Wait. I gotta rep my brother's stuff right. All my DMV soldiers, stand up! And welcome to the Commanders Gridiron Report. You want your Commanders to be repped right? Well, D Willy is your man. Commanders Gridiron Report, every Monday at 3:05 p.m. Eastern, 2:05 p.m. Central, exclusively on the SHOWSTOPPER Media YouTube channel. Music by J.KUL.
Where my soldiers, right side, Commanders. Where my soldiers, left side.
SHOWSTOPPER Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
Commanders. Where my soldiers, right side, Commanders. Where my soldiers, left side.
And welcome back to episode 20 of the Commanders Gridiron Report. I am again Drew Willingham here for this special February one-off special edition of this show. And we got some comments here. It looks like, oh, well, yeah. Ike says it feels like forever since the show was on. Yeah, I guess that was in response to what I was saying there at the end. The first one since January 8th here in the past 6 weeks. And, also says, where's the hair? Did you cut it? Well, the hair's still there. Hair's put back. Hair is nice and done up. It's about 16 inches long right now. It's ready to be cut. But, you know what? That gives me to a special announcement that I have for you guys. That now, I guess this is a better time than ever. I was going to do it later on, but might as well do it now. As this Sunday, March 3rd at 9:05 p.m. Eastern Time, episode 13 of D Willy in the Evening for the second season premiere. It'll be episode 13 of D Willy in the Evening, Christmas Lights in March. This is definitely going to be an interesting one there. And to answer your question again, the hair is still there, Ike, as you can see it in this picture. If I have 5 comments saying to show it before the end of this episode, then I will show it before the end of this episode. If not, you will have to wait until this Sunday at 9:05 p.m. Eastern Time when episode 13 is revealed live when I return, a.k.a. at 9:05 p.m. Eastern Time, 8:05 p.m. Central. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and take this into our final segment, that being the final drive.
We bet on ourselves, so what you expect? A die-hard fan never live with regret. Yes, sir.
And here with the final drive, this is my take. The final take when it comes to my closing thoughts on the Commanders prior to the start of free agency. You know, there's definitely some players that they can go after. When you think about the NFL free agents for 2024, there's a handful out there, and that's kind of being modest when it comes to, a handful. Could they go after an old quarterback and bring back somebody that they had previously? And Kirk Cousins, no, they're not going to. Kirk Cousins will either sign with Minnesota or he'll go somewhere else, but he definitely will not be going back to Washington. Washington's not going to reinvest in an aging quarterback that they could have had this entire time, even though it was different ownership and a different tenure. They have moved on from Kirk Cousins. Chris Jones, defensive tackle for the Chiefs, is most likely going back to the Chiefs after some of his comments after that last Super Bowl. I believe he wants to try to go for a three-peat and have 4 Super Bowls within a 6-year span. That would be something pretty special. I don't think that Chris Jones is going to be part of the free agents going to Washington. So that eliminates the top 2, because in my top 2, I have Chris Jones and Kirk Cousins as my top 2 free agents in this 2024 offseason. Got to look at Josh Allen, the edge rusher over there in Jacksonville. Could he potentially leave Jacksonville and go make a mark somewhere else? If he actually decides to entertain the free agent offers, we could see a special move over there in Washington, especially when you got Dan Quinn and his staff that's running the defense, and they're going to be more defensive-minded probably than the past tenure of coaching that we have with Riverboat Ron. I think that there's a pretty decent opportunity for either Josh Allen or the next pick that I have, defensive tackle Christian Wilkins from the Miami Dolphins. I think it's possible that they make a move there. But I think that we're more likely going to see an opportunity for potentially out of those two, Josh Allen coming over, because with Montez Sweat being traded, you either need to draft somebody that can be the heir apparent to that position, someone in a similar facet to how Montez Sweat was coming out of college, or you need to bring somebody in of that caliber to fill that gap, because throughout the remainder of that past season, from the moment that they traded Montez Sweat to Chicago, the edge rusher position was one of the weaker positions on defense. So I feel like in your free agents that you have an opportunity to go out there and get, you need to take a look at Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen, or the Josh Allen, however you want to say it, coming out of Jacksonville, free agent, would definitely fill that role out pretty well. And he's only 27 years old. He's only 27. So he's not that old. I feel like that would be a good move for the next 3 to 4 years as you try to start to build something over there. Then maybe next year or the year after, you draft another edge that Josh Allen can help lead and mentor, to where as he's leaving, it sets up the next person up really well with the knowledge and tutelage from that previous player in Allen. We could see something special there if they do it right. And I think that if you're going to go after a big name this offseason, especially during the free agent time, and for a team with a head coach that's very defensive minded, I think that you have to go after someone along the lines of Josh Allen. I think that'd be a good move. He may re-sign with Jacksonville, but with the way things ended there last year, he could be looking for something else. And if the Commanders offer him the right structured contract, I think that there's a possibility that he could come to Washington. That's going to be what I would say would be my lottery pick. It's probably not going to happen, but that would be someone that I would love to see go there. You look at Brian Burns, the edge from the Carolina Panthers. He's a year younger. If you couldn't get Josh Allen, I feel like your next best bet would be to go after him, to go after Brian Burns. He would be a pretty good, solid move to be made for that edge position as well. But I like Josh Allen more than I like him. If you have the opportunity to get Josh Allen, you take him at the edge position. Brian Burns secondary in this free agent market coming up. That's who I feel would be there. My next, ranked in the 6th position, I would say L'Jarius Sneed in the free agent offseason potential moves. I don't think that he goes anywhere else but back to Kansas City, considering since he's been drafted, he's won 2 Super Bowls. So looking at L'Jarius Sneed, I think your potential of going back to Kansas City and trying to go for that 3-peat. I think anybody who's a free agent on this Kansas City team has the best opportunity going back to Kansas City than any other team in the league, because 3-peating is special. And if they can do it with their salary cap and bring everybody back under the right deals, they're going to 3-peat. That's going to be my expectation for this year. If they can get all of their free agents back, especially the ones that made the most impact on this team this past year during their run. L'Jarius Sneed was one of them, and I feel like he's going back to Kansas City. I would say, I'm not going to go through my entire list of free agents, but, if you were going to help with that secondary, help with your safety position, which is something that's been, pretty weak with the Commanders for quite some time, I would say look at Antoine Winfield Jr. He had some success over there with the Tom Brady-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that 2020 season. I believe it was Antoine Winfield's rookie season, but he had success during that year, winning a Super Bowl, and could have learned some things from the greatest of all time at the quarterback position, even though it's a different position than his. But the leadership part of it, could have learned enough to where he could bring that over to Washington and help with that safety position and the secondary, most importantly, that has absolutely sucked for many years. It's absolutely been atrocious to watch that secondary along with that offensive line for the Commanders. The weakest parts of the team, like I've said, offensive line for offense and secondary for defense. And if you're going to make an adjustment during the free agent market, I feel like if you cannot get any of the aforementioned players that I spoke about when it comes to making adjustments at the edge position with Josh Allen or Brian Burns, or if you have a way to get one of those two and this person in Antoine Winfield, it would be an overnight change for this defense between you helping your secondary out with Winfield Jr. and you helping out your front and you're edge rushing with either Josh Allen or Brian Burns. That's who my main focus, if I was in the front office, would be during free agency. Josh Allen or Brian Burns at edge, or Antoine Winfield Jr. at the safety position. That's like my top 3 that I'm going after on the 15th of March when free agency starts. That's who I'm thinking. Danielle Hunter is an edge up there too, but he's 29 years old, and I don't want to throw the money at somebody who's on the verge of 30 at a position that takes a lot of beating. Edge, takes a good amount of beating. And Montez Sweat was something special. And if you're going to try to replace him this offseason, your best bet is with Josh Allen as far as the whole makeup and what type of impact he would make on that defense. Brian Burns secondary, he's not a slouch, but he's not as good as Josh Allen, in my opinion. But the age there that you have to work with, Brian Burns could develop into something better than what he is now because he's only 26, as well as Josh Allen could get a little bit more better because he's only 27. Some people could say Danielle Hunter is only 29. It's only 2 years older than Josh Allen. But Danielle Hunter, in my opinion, hasn't had the type of impact on the game like Josh Allen has at that edge rusher position. So I feel like out of those moves, in the top 10 of the available free agents this offseason, along with the potential of this next person who I have at 10, defensively, those are the 3 people that you need to look at that I've mentioned. Now, in my top 10 of available free agents, at number 10 would help out on the offensive side, but I just don't see this potentially happening in Washington. Mike Evans is a free agent as a wide receiver this offseason. Super Bowl winning champion with Tom Brady over there in Tampa Bay. Did some special things, with Tom Brady during those 3 years with him, and did, some special things with Jameis and crew beforehand, still racking up 1,000-yard seasons with lackluster talent around him, leading up to the success they had with Tom Brady. Looking at this past year's team, if Baker hadn't led them to the playoffs and they hadn't had the successes that they had in the second half of the season, I think Mike Evans would be leaving Tampa Bay. I think there's a really good chance that Mike Evans returns to Tampa Bay because that team is on the come up again. They fell down, a little bit with Tom Brady left, and they were kind of on the decline as he was on his way out the door anyway in that previous season when he was there. I feel like Mike Evans sees that there's a potential for this team to continue to improve. The only way I don't see him going back is if he has some type of issue with the coaching staff or for some reason has developed an issue with the player management. Other than that, I think he goes back to Tampa Bay. I don't see him going anywhere but there. I think the best opportunity for landing a replacement, I wouldn't say a replacement, but a secondary wide receiver to complement Terry McLaurin, because Mike Evans is kind of a 1. If you brought him in there, it'd be like, 1A and 1B, and that may cause an issue. I feel like the next person that you could bring in to add as a secondary piece on that wide receiver core without causing any issues of who needs the ball more than the other would be Michael Pittman, the wide receiver from the Indianapolis Colts. And if you took Michael Pittman off of the Indianapolis Colts this past year, I don't think Uncle Rico and crew would have had the type of success that they had. Even though it came down to the wire if they were going to get to the playoffs or not, I think that they wouldn't have even been in that position without Michael Pittman. And that could be a lot of pressure on him at this time. And with that being said, with that pressure comes issues. And if he doesn't have the right weapons around him to balance everything out, like he could if he had Terry McLaurin and crew, if they build the right pieces in Washington, I feel like if he goes to Washington, he would have a lot less pressure on his shoulders to perform, which could result in better numbers because he wouldn't have to worry about being the top guy. Terry's taking it pretty well. You'd be taking pressure off of him because of the coverage will be balanced a little bit more. They might not always be double teaming him, or if they do, that leaves you open potentially to make a play. And if they don't double him, that leaves you both in the opportunity to make a play. So looking at this right here between Michael Pittman, between Calvin Ridley, between, the other wide receivers like Marquise Brown that are available in this free agency, I just feel like, unless you make a stab at Gabe Davis, who's not a higher ranked wide receiver, Gabe Davis with his size and with what he was able to pull off in Buffalo, if he doesn't re-sign with Buffalo, would be your only secondary option outside of Michael Pittman. Because again, I don't think that they're going to get Evans, and if they don't get Pittman, I would say out of the other wide receivers I mentioned, because I don't think Calvin Ridley is going to even be at play, you go after Gabe Davis if you can't get Michael Pittman. So there's several great players in this free agent market. I don't see them making a stab at Derrick Henry. There's been a lot of talk about him potentially going to the Dallas Cowboys. Running game was definitely not the greatest this past year. However, I feel like they have decent talent in the running core. They just don't have the offensive line to help block for who they have running the ball. You could put anybody back there, the greatest running back of all time, and with this type of running back blocking scheme that they have going on over there, with this type of offensive line and their tackles and guards, you can have the greatest center around. You can put Jason Kelce on there and still have terrible offensive tackles and guards, and they're still going to be terrible. So it's the entirety of that line needs an overhaul. And whether you keep the same running backs there you have to have a better blocking scheme in order to protect whoever's running the ball. So I think that they need to stay away from making moves at the running back position this offseason. If anything, they need to make moves at the tight end position on offense outside of wide receiver and offensive line. And when it comes to tight end, there's not really any big names that really stick out to me that they can really go out there and grab and make an impact. I think that they need to do their homework and see who they feel would be their best to fill in from college, who they could draft in this draft coming up. I think that, based on the available tight ends, you got Dalton Schultz, from his first 5 seasons in Dallas, and he spent last year in Houston. I feel like with what he did over there, I'm not trying to throw any shade on him, but I don't feel like he would fit the mold well, or even Hunter Henry would fit the mold well in Washington. I feel like Dalton Schultz needs to go back to Houston, because that scheme with what they've got over there with CJ Stroud, they can continue to do special things, and he would have a better career in Houston than he would with Washington. I just feel like he fits that scheme better than what he would if he came to the Commanders. Other than that, when it comes to tight ends in this free agency, between those two right there, I'm just not seeing anybody else, honestly, that really says, sign me, that says, pick me up and let's do something special over there on that offense. Noah Fant is 26 years old, but since he was traded from the Broncos to the Seahawks, he's been a little bit more reliable than he was in Denver, but I don't feel like, his growth in the past few years warrants a decent contract for the Commanders to sign him for. But we could see them potentially sign him, because out of all of the 100 available free agents, 101, my apologies, those 3 tight ends on that list, again, I see Schultz going back to Houston. Fant, I don't see him being a big difference maker if he came to Washington. And, putting those two together alongside Hunter Henry, I don't think that this could be match made in heaven, tight end position, because you need someone to block. You need to look at Sam Laporta in Detroit as a big example of when you draft somebody and you get the full package of not just being able to catch and set a record for the franchise for a rookie and the amount of completions in a season. You need to look at their ability at run blocking and pass blocking when they're not involved in the play to receive the ball. Okay. If they make an impact on that side, I'd say sign them. Schultz does okay, and I feel like I'm not getting excited about that right there, about what he can do, because I feel like he's going to go back to Houston. Okay. Hunter Henry's a wild card, can go anywhere. I don't see him going back to the Patriots. If anything, he could potentially go back to the Chargers to be a secondary tight end under the new Jim Harbaugh scheme. I can see that being potential. Fant, I'm drawing a blank when I think about him, and I hope that's not going to curse the team for them to pick him up and then it doesn't go as expected from the front office's view. It would go more along the way of what I expect. I just don't even want to be put in that position. I think they need to draft a tight end this year. Definitely not with the second overall pick, no. But in the second or third or fourth rounds, and even if they got to pick up 2 tight ends, they have the draft capital this year to do it. And we'll talk about that more on the next episode, as I will have a March episode next month. Probably about 3 to 4 weeks. It will be either the third or fourth week in March. It'll be after free agency gets started, which is why I'm taking a little bit extra time today covering my thoughts on free agency. When it comes to the tight end position, based on what you have available at free agency, I think you need to draft or trade, one of those two. So please do not throw away too much money when it comes to what's available on the market. I don't see them going after Derrick Henry for running back. Like I said previously, I don't see them re-signing Chase Young because they traded him to the 49ers. And he was kind of like a wave, an up and down wave with the 49ers having, some success here. And then mainly he would have success in the half of a game, where the first half he would be dominant, like in the Super Bowl, and the second half he wouldn't show up, one of those two options. And did that similarly in other playoff games as well, and throughout the regular season after he was traded. So for them, it was probably worth the 3rd round pick. Montez Sweat, they got destroyed, I would say, as far as their pick with that one, with only receiving a 2nd round pick, because I feel like the Commanders should have gotten the 1st round pick for Montez Sweat. Chase Young should have been the 2nd round pick, but now looking back on it, I can accept the 3rd round pick, but Montez Sweat, you got screwed. Unless they end up re-signing him and he becomes super successful with this defense, I don't see that being a win-win for that one to make up for that. And I don't see them signing him anyway, because they traded him for a reason, to get some type of draft capital for one, but also he was a pick during the previous ownership and during the previous GM's tenure. So I don't see them re-signing him unless Dan Quinn just really, really likes Chase Young and says to Adam Peters, hey, I really, really want to give this guy another chance here in Washington. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's the only way that happens. Josh Jacobs, 26-year-old running back. He kind of had a little bit of a slow start last year. He kind of looked more like his 2022 form towards the end of the year. But I feel like Josh Jacobs, if you're going to make a move at running back, as long as he doesn't cost too much, he's only 26, you can still get another 2 to 3 to 4 good years out of him at the running back position. I think a 2 or 3 year modest deal would be okay to get a little bit more support at the running back position. I think that Josh Jacobs would be a decent addition if you were to make some type of move in the free agency market this year. So I wouldn't go too far out there and spend too much money, because I feel like Brian Robinson could be something special if you continue to develop him and get the right pieces around him, like I mentioned earlier with the offensive line. But if you put that all together, that could be something that could be discussed, I think, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. We're going to make an upgrade at linebacker, going back to defense. You got to look at Jordan Brooks, a 26-year-old who played with the Seattle Seahawks, who did pretty decent over there in his time. I mean, he wasn't part of like the legendary defense like the Legion of Boom. But if you're going to make a move at linebacker, which has kind of been a little bit on the decline since Cole Holcomb left the past offseason and went to the Steelers. Cole Holcomb wasn't like, the greatest linebacker out there in the game today, but he held his own. And I feel like if you bring in Jordan Brooks, he could be someone who's still fairly young, who can still make an impact. And I feel like it'd be a pretty decent pickup and wouldn't cost you too much for the linebacker position. Going down the list of the ranked free agents at 41, you got Cam Curl, who was previously with the Commanders and is only 25 years old. But I would more than likely want to see them bring in Antoine Winfield Jr. over him. If Winfield Jr. goes back to the Bucs, or, doesn't just come to the Commanders at all, I could see them going after Cameron Curl again and re-signing him. It's probably more likely that they bring in Cam Curl than Antoine Winfield Jr. at the safety position. But I feel like you would get an upgrade if you signed Antoine Winfield Jr. for the free agency pick over Cam Curl. Yeah, he's a year older at 26, and Cam Curl's only 25, but you've already gotten the results out of Winfield, and he's still producing at a high level. Cam Curl's doing okay. He's holding his own at certain points, but he's not holding his own enough when you're losing 13 out of 17 games. So if I were to look at the safety position during this free agency time, I would have to say that I would have to go with Antoine Winfield Jr. over Cameron Curl, and deservingly so. And it'll just depend when that point comes around if that option's available, because again, they do have a lot of draft capital, and we'll cover that again in the next episode next month for the March one-off special. Jadeveon Clowney is the next one on the ranked list. He's 31 years old, and this is probably where he was ranked around this time last year. He's kind of taken a little bit of a downfall over the past couple of years. Again, he's older. If you're, again, looking at that edge position like we talked about earlier, I would stick with the Josh Allens and the Brian Burns as the 1 and 2 as your go-tos to try to sign this offseason, even though the chances are a little bit slimmer to sign them over a Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney's 31 and is not playing at the level as what he once played. And I feel like you would get more productive years out of Josh Allen than Brian Burns. Leave Jadeveon Clowney alone, in my opinion. Even though he's kind of ranked lower on the list, I like this player right here, and someone that they could definitely pick up probably on a pretty respectable deal. For the offensive guard position, John Simpson, who previously played with the Ravens, even though the Ravens are a good team and he's more than likely to re-sign with that team. If the Commanders offer him the right type of contract, the right structure, the right amount of years, and it's not far away from Baltimore, so he wouldn't have to move far away. Depending on what his thoughts are within the management style over there for the Commanders when he meets with different teams to discuss free agent contracts and free agent opportunities, I could see that potentially happening too, and especially with the way the Ravens collapsed in this past playoff run. Who's to say that he doesn't leave, takes a few more dollars, and could play for a team with a different but potentially better opportunity in the long run. Because if John Harbaugh keeps having these exits like he has, with Lamar Jackson in the next year or two, we could see the John Harbaugh era end in Baltimore. And even though he would probably get a coaching job somewhere else, if you're a player thinking this right now, if this team doesn't get over the hump in the next year or two, during this contract that I could have a different coach to play for. And I feel like even this could be a potential opportunity for that to happen in DC, with Dan Quinn might not seeing out his entire contract. You have other pieces around you that have been far more successful than what you would in the Ravens, and that being in the front office with Adam Peters and the other personnel around him that are trying to build something special from the ownership to the management. It's going to happen at some point in DC with a better name at that. So thinking about that, going down this list, the further you go down this list, the older the players get. There's still some decent players on the list when you think about Fletcher Cox and, Hunter Henry's okay, but we already went through that situation with the tight end. But when you think about Fletcher Cox and Kenny Moore and these guys that in Grover Stewart, these guys and Trent Brown that are in their 30s, early 30s at this point, they're on their probably last good contract, like last lucrative contract, to where they'll get paid till they're 33 or 34. And unless they're like Tom Brady or someone who's still playing at a high level at that age at 34, or Drew Brees or someone at the quarterback position, this is more likely going to be your last contract, that's going to be lucrative. And if you're the Commanders, a team that has been known for several decades and throughout pretty much the majority of their franchise's history, is going out there and spending money on talent that has basically, no offense, washed up or past their prime and getting very little out of them, except for that short period of time with Over the Hill Gang in the 70s and the 80s. The Commanders, formerly known as the Redskins, every time they go out there and get these old players, they have lackluster success, if any at all. So I'm bringing all these points up to try and somehow, in the airwaves, the interwebs, the streams, to get it through people's heads, to get it through to their heads, to not go after these older players. You got to have a cap of like 27, 28 years old of the age, and with a player, unless there's someone really special, that you're willing to throw a detailed structure, like overly structured contract to, meaning way too much money, or not way too much money, but a higher amount of money, or a higher amount of guaranteed money if the contract is 75% to 100% guaranteed, like what you have over there in Cleveland. So thinking about this right here, this is why I'm bringing up the age of these players and where they come from and their development at that point, because, you know, some of these players like Clowney is 31 and other players like Cox, who's 34, I believe, you're not going to want to throw but so much money at these players or an extended length of time, because one, you might not have but a year or two with them. Two, you don't know how they're going to gel with the culture in the locker room. So if you can't get out of their contract within a year without it penalizing the team, what's the point of even taking the gamble? I hope that this ownership in this past season, with it being their first season of ownership, because they took over very shortly before the season started, I hope that they reviewed everything to where when they look at this team's history, and especially Josh Harris being a fan of this team before he became an owner of it, I hope that he looks and sees the history of spending too much money on older players and not reaping much dividends from it, and not seeing the success that they should have gotten had they spent less money on a position player of that position who was younger that they could have developed, and then moved around that other money that they wouldn't have spent on other talent to help as, you know, collective pieces around that one player you just paid for. There's a lot of things that can be done like that this offseason, and I think that's why they took their time with the coaching hires this offseason, and this whole debacle of this team over the course of several decades. It's going to be slow but sure that this team is going to turn around, and I can feel it. It's not going to be this year. They're not going to be making a deep run this year. And if I'm wrong, that would be a great surprise. I just don't see them turning this thing around for another 3 to 5 completely. I'm hopeful for 6 to 7 wins this year. If they can get more than that, we'll be pleasantly surprised. But I feel like that's a legitimate expectation, a decent expectation that we could see for this upcoming year. Let's see what kind of comments that we've got right here before I go further with this free agent list before I wrap it on up. The Commanders Gridiron Report is brought to you by Sleazeball Meaty Subs. Don't beat the meat. Don't toss the salad. Just enjoy the subs, says Sick Diggy. Ike says, show it. And I guess that is response to if I said if I got 5 show it texts here in the comments from 5 different individuals. I said 5 comments saying show it, then I would show the long hair before this show goes off the air. But if not, again, you will see it this Sunday, March 3rd at 9:05 p.m. Eastern Time on Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome. For D Willy in the evening and the long hair, you will see it then. But again, we are here for the final drive, and the comments that we have at bay besides that, Ike, I love you, man. Thank you for staying in your lane, says Mickey Delaney. And as a follow-up to the Sleazeball Meaty Subs, we've got, and Slackjaw VPN, the VPN for slacking off on the sneak. That's Slackjaw VPN, where the slacking be smooth. I like that, Sick. And for that, I'm going to give you this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Followed by a
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Just for the fun of it right there. Thank you guys for the comments right there. With that being said, Got a few more free agents I want to talk about that could be an addition to this team. And we talked about an offensive guard position, earlier. And I kind of want to stick within the offense. And I talked about John Simpson, the offensive guard for the Ravens. If I were to talk about another offensive position on that line, besides, him, I would say Kevin Dotson, who's 27 years old from the Rams. He's an offensive guard, someone that could definitely come in and help you out there as well, and young enough to still work with for years to come. But if we're going to go to the other side, to the offensive tackle position, there's not many options, I would say, as far as youth. And if there was any person that I was going to take the bait and risk it, I would say 31-year-old Trent Brown from the Patriots is a decent talent that I would say if you can get him on a cheap enough deal, which Patriots are used to getting cheap deals over there for successful teams for the most part, I would say you bring him in. If not, definitely go younger if possible and go with Jonah Williams, the tackle from the Cincinnati Bengals. You've really got to look at your offensive tackles and your offensive guards to upgrade this offensive line that has been playing very dismal for the past, I would say, 8 to 9 years at minimum. So looking at this team right here, you got to look at these guys that I've mentioned, especially for the youth. Trent Brown would be the only exception, and it's only because of the success that he had before the Patriots' demise. I would say you got to look at that. Connor Williams is someone that, even though he had a ACL tear last year when he was with the Dolphins, he's someone that I feel like you should definitely take a look at, because you could play him at either the tackle or guard position. Jonah Jackson is also 27 years old, coming from the Lions. He was really reliable in pass coverage, and that's something that this team definitely needs help with, is pass coverage. And I would say give a look at him too. There were some wide receivers that I had said earlier that, would be a good 1B, would be a good complementary piece. Mike Evans, of course, we said was probably not going to be an option, as he's more than likely going to re-sign with Tampa Bay. I was saying that Michael Pittman would be a good reach to go with, as he's still in the top 15 of options to get in the free agent market. Calvin Ridley, I don't think they're going to have any opportunity yet. I think that he's going to cost a little bit too much. But Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown, would be someone that I would look at, who's 27 years old, could be a good secondary option for Terry McLaurin over there on the wide receiver, to go on the other side, on the opposite side of him, as long as he doesn't cost too much. Curtis Samuel's 28 years old, but didn't do enough, in my opinion, to warrant to be re-signed by the team. So for that, I'm going to say, as far as that wide receiver, I'm not going to be that high on it. But when it comes to someone that, if you want to save some money and not go after a Mike Evans or a Michael Pittman Jr. or a Marquise Brown, a.k.a. Hollywood Brown, if you want to save some money and go after someone that can still get 1,000 yards in a season, who's only 26 years old, I'd go after Darnell Mooney. That'd be a good secondary option for Terry McLaurin, and somebody that you can get for a relatively decent deal over there as your secondary option at wide receiver. Other than that, when you're looking at the wide receiver position, you got KJ Osborne coming from the Vikings, who's 27 years old, could be a decent option as well. But when you throw all those options out there, I think, especially with Odell Beckham being 31 years old and has had the injuries that he's had, even though he did have some highlights in the playoffs, if you're going to go after anybody who's pushing the age of 30, who's currently 29 years old, you got to look at Tyler Boyd, the success that he has had over there in Cincinnati. You got to look at that and say, hey, even though he's 29, pushing 30 years old, we could have some decent success with this kid right here if we get him on the right contract. So looking at all that right there, as far as all my free agents and ones that can make the biggest impact to this Commanders team, even though I went on an extensive rant, I wouldn't say rant, but discussion about these players, these are the ones I could see making the biggest impact to this free agent market for this team if they pick them up. If you get 2 or 3 or 4 of the names I mentioned, I'll be happy. Hell, if you get one of them, I'll be happy because I was spot on about that. But besides that, make some moves here in the draft. We'll cover those potential mock opportunities here on the next episode of the Commanders Gridiron Report. Dante's here right at the end. I appreciate you showing up, my man. Thank you for being here. As he says, what's good, bro? I say trade for Adams or DK Metcalf if you feel like Harrison Jr. isn't going to be there for wide receiver. You know, if they don't take, that's a good take too, because I don't think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go number 1. So with them having the number 2 pick, Marvin Harrison Jr., I feel like would be a really great option, even though there's not many quarterback options on the free agent market except for like Ryan Tannehill. I think that's really in the top 100, really and Baker Mayfield, but we know Baker's going to go back to Tampa Bay. I don't see him going anywhere else but Tampa Bay. Those are like your only 2 quarterbacks available in the top 100. Oh, Kirk Cousins, my apologies. But again, Kirk Cousins isn't going to go back, to Washington after all this time. I think that, they can still develop Sam Howell, but unfortunately, as much as I want them to get Marvin Harrison Jr., I think they're going to draft a quarterback. It's going to be Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, one of those 2. And that's something that I'll talk more about on the next episode when I come back next month with the pre-draft show. But when it comes to free agents, I don't see a reliable quarterback, especially up there in age, someone that would fit within the system or that wants to come to Washington, be available. Sam Howell will still be on this team, I believe, even if it's in a backup role for this upcoming year. And that leaves only 2 options that the Commanders make a move at quarterback, and that being either via trade or the draft in this possibility of this offseason. So as much as I want Marvin Harrison Jr., I really like this statement right here. I feel like they still draft a quarterback with 2, and that they could potentially trade for Adams or Metcalf. But I feel like Adams, if he gets traded, is going to go to the Jets and play with Rodgers. DK Metcalf would be a good choice. I feel like out of those 2 players they could potentially trade for would be DK Metcalf and would be a great secondary option with Terry McLaurin. That's a great solution right there, Dante. I really like that one. But we'll see. Like I said, I named off, the free agents I feel like they'd have their best opportunities making an impact to improve this team to at least get 6 to 7 to potentially 8 wins this upcoming year. We shall see. And Dante says, do you really believe you need a quarterback out of the draft? I like the idea of building weapons for the future like Brock and Dak in the next year's draft. Yes, I would rather keep Sam Howell. But, so far this team right here from the front office on has made different moves that tells you that they're going to make moves within the player personnel as well. They've got different offense and defensive coordinator, different head coach, different GM, and these players that are on this team are ones that they didn't pick. So thinking about it, even though Sam Howell threw for over 3,000 yards, and I feel like did the best he could on a 4-win team, considering he didn't have anybody blocking for him in the best right, even though some people will say that he had the 19th best time when it comes to the amount of time the offensive line was giving him. But that's still a lot closer to the 32nd to the worst than it is to the best. So I feel like make your moves, like you said, the pieces around him. If you trade for DK Metcalf, I like that. If you draft a tight end, I feel like would be not in the first round, of course, but with one of the draft capital, you have a lot of it, bringing in a decently talented tight end or a former quarterback who could be a tight end, if he's tall enough and has the build for it. Either way, but the unfortunate failure with that would be we could look at Logan Thomas, who was a quarterback before and didn't transition over to tight end the way that we hoped. He was definitely dominant when healthy, but he's just gotten the sting for being unhealthy at times, and especially at the times where the team has needed him the most. So I like what they have at running back. I like, 1A Terry McLaurin. I just think that the running backs didn't produce because of the offensive line. If you make the moves to make trades, or there's some decent talent in the free agent market for offensive tackles and offensive guards, I feel like they need to make the splashes this year with those picks and make, some decently offered structured contract opportunities for those players, because I feel like you got some good opportunities there in free agency and in the draft. Between those two, the free agency and draft, you bring in offensive line upgrades. You bring in an edge rusher, whether it's through the draft or you bring in somebody like Josh Allen or Brian Burns, and then you make an upgrade at the safety position somewhere along that line in the secondary positioning between a cornerback or a safety. You bring in Antoine Winfield Jr. or somebody along those lines and upgrade that secondary core. I feel like they're going to have a little bit more of an impact to success, rather than you draft a quarterback and you have to start from scratch with developing talent right there, when I feel like Sam Howell could be developed. And if it doesn't work out, then the next offseason you can go and draft a quarterback, or you can go and trade for it. I just don't think that the quarterbacks available up there are going to make enough of a splash. And if you can get Marvin Harrison Jr. and if you can get DK Metcalf, and you put Metcalf in the slot and you had Marvin Harrison as your 2 and Terry as your 1, at least for a year or two, and saw how that worked, I feel like that, along with some offensive upgrades, you could have something special over there brewing in Washington before too long. But hey, we'll have to see what happens. I'm not going to get too excited until we get closer to the season, but that is my thoughts right now when it comes to this episode, this February one-off special edition, as we basically catch up on not having this show for the past 6 weeks. It'll be another 3 to 4 weeks before I bring it back, as we've got to wait for some more news to unravel for us to have a full show like this. But today was definitely fun. I want to give a shout out to Sick Diggy, Mickey Delaney, Dante Hill for stopping by. As he says, so stupid if they move on from Sam. Something never changes with Washington. Yes. And I don't want them to move from Sam either, but I'm just laying out the options on if they did. But I feel like they're going to stick with them at least for this year, and I hope that they do. And even if they do draft a quarterback, they're going to stick with Sam to help develop that rookie quarterback, I feel like. And I really don't want them to draft with that second overall pick a quarterback. I'd rather get Marvin Harrison Jr. so we could see what this team would look like with 2 great wide receivers with Harrison Jr. and Terry McLaurin. But hey, we'll have to see how things pan out for this team over the course of the next few weeks during free agency before we can get too excited about what's happening here nor there. But I just want to thank you all so far for thanking – not thank you for thanking you, but just want to thank you all for watching episode 20 of the Commanders Gridiron Report. It's definitely been a fun one. Again, thank you, Dante, Sick Diggy, Mickey Delaney, Ike, Michael Miller. Looks like we've got Wiesel Hefe, Ryan McCarthy. Those of you who jumped in momentarily, like you guys. All of you, thank you for jumping in and saying what's up and tuning in, along with Corey Mann, Tyrone Montgomery Jr., Rob Johnson, Ben Sutter III, and WQEE The Keys, Ryan O'Neill. Thank you all for tuning in over there on Facebook. I definitely appreciate it, as well as those of you watching this on Team MBS Media, as well as A7BN Sports. Thank you all for tuning in with this Sartoba Media broadcast, where the struggle is real to be awesome. This has been a fun hour and a half. Look forward to coming back for the March one-off special to discuss the draft and its potential upcoming moves they can make with my mock draft for the Washington picks, at least for that episode. We'll see you here in about 3 to 4 weeks. I've only got one more thing left to do, and that is to tell you to stay safe out here in these streets.
Where my soldiers, right side, Commanders. Where my soldiers, left side, Commanders. Where my soldiers, watch the middle, Commanders. Where my soldiers, where we step. Where my soldiers, right side, Commanders. Where my soldiers, left side, where we step. Where my soldiers, watch the middle, Commanders. Where my soldiers,
Sartoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
You ain't got to go home, but you got to get on up out of here. This episode 20, has come to a close. We will see you all here in the next 3 to 4 weeks for the March one-off episode. And thank you again for tuning in. And as always, stay safe out here in these streets.